Welcome, curious listeners, to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a truly monumental text, often overlooked, actually. It really shook the foundations of pre-independence India. And, well, its ripples are still profoundly felt today. Shapes modern India. We're talking about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's blistering critique, Annihilation of Caste, and the seismic debate, often quite fraught, that it sparked with none other than Mahatma Gandhi. So our mission today is to unpack this powerful work, understand its explosive context, and explore why it remains so vital, so urgent, really, for understanding India past, present, and future.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating here is that we're looking at a text that it started life as an undelivered speech. Can you imagine? Deemed unbearable by the very people who invited him, yet it somehow transcended that censorship, became a legend, a foundational document for a whole movement, actually.
Wow, unbearable.
Yeah, and it's a profound exploration, not just of social hierarchy, the mechanics of it, but of the very moral, even spiritual fabric of a nation. So we'll be connecting the dots for you, linking its historical moment, that dawn of Indian independence, with the enduring questions it raises. Questions about justice, equality, national identity, sometimes uncomfortable questions.
Okay, let's get into this then, because this isn't just dusty history or some academic back and forth. It's about a conversation that defines a huge, often kind of hidden part of modern India, a conversation that you might have missed entirely, even though it had such a profound impact. We'll explore why that is and why understanding this complex interplay, this clash of visions between Ambedkar and Gandhi is more relevant than ever for appreciating the nuanced tapestry of India today. So, Section 1, Annihilation of Caste itself, the undelivered speech and how it all began. Okay, the origin story. You mentioned it was unbearable. Just imagine preparing a speech so radical, so uncompromising that the group who invited you, and get this, was a Hindu reformist group trying to break caste, they canceled the whole event because the content was just too much for them. That's exactly what happened with Annihilation of Caste in 1936. I mean, that alone tells you something, right? The kind of earthquake this text was.
It does. The backstory is absolutely crucial for understanding its power. The group was the Jat-Pat Todak Mandal of Lahore, and they were genuinely committed, on the surface at least, to caste reform. They specifically sought out Ambedkar, knew his reputation, his intellect. They even sent him questions they were struggling with about reform, asking for guidance, really. But when they got the draft, well, it was far beyond what they bargained for, way outside their comfort zone.
So it wasn't just about minor tweaks or criticism.
Not at all. He didn't just propose reforms to caste practices. He launched a full frontal assault, a dismantling. He went right at the idea of caste sacredness. And by extension, he denounced foundational religiously sanctioned aspects of Hinduism itself. That was the core issue for them, the unbearable truth. I mean, think about it. For Hindu reformers, it was like going to the doctor for a cough and being told your whole system is fundamentally diseased.
Right, that fundamental challenge to their identity.
Exactly. So their decision to cancel, despite inviting him, despite claiming to want reform, it just highlights the deep resistance to radical change, even among reformers. It wasn't just disagreement. It was a fundamental clash, theological, philosophical, threatening their whole worldview.
And this is where the story gets even more interesting, right? This rejection didn't silence him.
Far from it. It spurred his legendary determination. He just went ahead and printed 1,500 copies himself, at his own expense, May 1936. That act of self-publishing, born out of necessity, turned a censored speech into this powerful, independent manifesto. Shows his conviction, doesn't it? These ideas had to get out there.
And what happened next? Did it reach a wide audience then?
Well, yes and no. For decades, like a lot of Ambedkar's work, actually, it was reprinted by small presses, mostly Dalit-owned, translated into at least 6 languages, read primarily by Dalit readers. So it became this strange thing, largely obscure to the privileged castes who our sources say were blissfully ignorant of its existence.
Blissfully.
Yet foundational to a massive anti-caste movement. It created this kind of parallel intellectual universe. The text itself became a legend, a touchstone for those it spoke to, even if it couldn't reach them through official channels initially.
Incredible resilience.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the man himself, who was B.R. Ambedkar.
Right. To really get the force of this text, you have to understand the man. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. Born in 1891 into the Mahar caste in Maharashtra, considered untouchable. He was, without doubt, one of India's most radical, brilliant thinkers, a truly consequential figure. His life story, well, it's extraordinary. From modest beginnings to this towering intellectual, he didn't just engage with the struggle against British colonialism. His primary fight was against caste oppression.
He was highly educated, wasn't he? Abroad.
Extremely. Thanks to a scholarship from the Maharaja of Baroda, a progressive ruler. He studied at Columbia University in the U.S., then the London School of Economics, got his Ph.D. in economics there. This Western liberal education gave him a unique critical perspective on Indian society, free from the inherited biases of the Indian establishment. But his academic brilliance was always grounded in his lived experience of discrimination. He could synthesize theory and reality in a way few others could.
And later, he was central to the Indian state itself.
Absolutely. He oversaw the drafting of the Indian Constitution, the document that outlawed untouchability, enshrined equality, served as India's first law minister, worked tirelessly on the Hindu Code Bill, trying to reform personal laws, especially for women, divorce, property rights. His contributions are just indelible.
But his personal journey, his break with Hinduism, that seems equally powerful.
It absolutely is, and it informs everything he did. In 1935, just a year before the speech, he declared publicly, "Though I was born a Hindu, I would not die as one." That wasn't just rhetoric. It was profound disappointment with a religion he felt sanctioned injustice. A defiant statement. He was determined to find a faith that offered dignity, equality, true emancipation.
Which led him to Buddhism.
Yes, eventually. In 1956, just months before he died, he led this huge mass conversion ceremony. Hundreds of thousands followed him. This personal commitment to change mirrored his call for societal change. It showed his belief in individual agency, in the power of choosing a different path, even spiritually, to break free from caste. His life was proof that you could break free from inherited constraints.
Okay, so we have the man, the context of the speech. But for many listeners, maybe caste still feels abstract, historical. Arundhati Roy's introduction, The Doctor and the Saint, really brings it into the present, doesn't it? That story from Kerlanji.
It does, powerfully and tragically. Kerlanji, a village in Maharashtra. It makes the horror of caste undeniably contemporary. We should probably share some details, as difficult as they are. Sureka Bhutmanj, a Dalit woman, 40 years old. More educated than her husband, which was unusual. Her family had converted to Buddhism, like Ambedkar. They owned land, but the village council, controlled by privileged castes, systematically denied them basic things.
Like what?
No electricity connection, couldn't build a proper brick house, no access to canal water for their crops, couldn't use the public well. And when Sureka protested, things escalated. People drove carts through their fields, let cattle eat their crops, attacked a relative. Police ignored her complaints, basically. Made some arrests when the relative was attacked, but the accused were out almost immediately. Impunity.
And this led to something truly horrific.
Yes. July 2006. Sureka's family, her two sons, Sudhir and Roshan, her 17-year-old daughter, Priyanka, were brutally raped and murdered. This happened in 2006, modern India. And yet, there were no I Am Sureka petitions, no global outrage like we saw from Malala Yousafzai, for instance. It makes Ambedkar's words from decades earlier. To the untouchables, Hinduism is a veritable chamber of horrors, just chillingly real. It shows the life and death consequences of the system he was fighting.
It really underscores why he was so insistent, doesn't it? That this wasn't just theory.
Exactly. It shows how caste intertwines with gender violence, economic oppression, how it persists. And it highlights that project of unseeing. We might talk about later how privileged circles often ignore or deny this ongoing reality. For you, the listener, this story gives a visceral understanding of what Ambedkar was truly up against.
Okay, let's move into Ambedkar's actual critique within the speech. Section 2. How did he systematically break down the caste system? He certainly didn't mince words. Quote, "There cannot be a more degrading system. It deadens, paralyzes, and cripples." So beyond the moral outrage, what was his core systematic argument against it? What made it so destructive in his analysis?
His primary argument, and it's really incisive, is that caste isn't just a division of labor. That's how some defended it, right? Including Gandhi sometimes. But Ambedkar said, no, it's a division of laborers.
Division of laborers. Okay, what's the key difference there?
Huge difference. In most societies, you have tasks divided up, sure, but individuals can usually move between jobs, follow their talents, adapt. Caste, however, rigidly locks you into an occupation based on birth, regardless of your skills, your intelligence, your passion. And he argued this leads to profound inefficiency, societal stagnation. Because people are forced into jobs where their hearts nor their minds are in their work. Productivity suffers. Innovation is crushed. It subordinates human potential to these arbitrary social ritual rules. Talent is wasted. Liberty is curtailed. Society as a whole loses out. He saw it crushing both the individual spirit and national progress.
And the degradation wasn't just economic or psychological. Those historical practices he mentions are horrifying.
absolutely dehumanizing. His own caste, the Mahars, forced to tie brooms to their waists to sweep away their polluted footprints. Others had to hang spittoons around their necks to catch polluted saliva. Practices designed not just for separation, but to constantly reinforce subhuman status. And Ambedkar warns, in many parts of India, much of this continues to this day. It wasn't just ancient history then, and sadly, as Karlanji showed, it isn't now. Our sources even mention love being seen as polluting, and in some horrific cases, rape considered purification. It's that deeply ingrained.
Unbelievable. Now, he also specifically took on this idea of a reformed caste system, right? Chaturvarnya.
Yes, he directly challenged the Arya Samajists and other reformers who were pushing this idealized fourfold division: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. Their argument was it should be based on guna, worth or quality, and karma, action, not birth. They pointed to scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita to support this, trying to make it sound meritocratic, salvage Hinduism while ditching the worst bits.
It sounds appealing on the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A merit-based system.
Why did Ambedkar see it as, well, a dangerous delusion?
He saw two massive flaws. First, practically speaking, how on earth do you accurately classify people into just 4 rigid boxes based on something as vague and complex as worth? Human qualities are variable, they evolve. He pointed out, echoing Plato, that it's just not practical. Science shows people are too diverse for these crude boxes.
Okay, so impractical. What was the second flaw? This was the more crucial one, morally, he asked. Who protects the Shudra? Or even the Vaishya and Kshatriya? When the Brahmin inevitably holds the monopoly on knowledge, interpretation, power, who stops them exploiting the others? It sets up this ward and guardian relationship, but the guardian has all the power and zero accountability.
Ah, so it inevitably becomes master and servant.
Precisely. It degenerates. There's no mechanism to safeguard the interests of the so-called lower groups from the higher ones. So for Ambedkar, even this idealized version was inherently unjust because the power imbalance was still fundamentally there, just dressed up differently.
So it's a critique of power disguised as spirituality.
You could say that. He saw through the veneer to the core issue of unchecked power.
And this power, he argued, was rooted in religion itself.
Absolutely central to his argument. He said caste wasn't just social habit. It was deeply embedded in religious belief, sanctioned by the Hindu Shastras, the scriptures. His solution: radically simple, yet explosive. The real remedy is to destroy the belief in the sanctity of the Shastras. He felt Hindus weren't truly free to use reason because their lives were governed by these ancient texts and customs, Veda, Smriti, Sadachar. True reform couldn't come from within, he argued, because the religion itself propped up the system.
And he had that example about the Brahmin, right? Even if they do something low caste, like selling shoes.
Exactly. A Brahmin could transgress, sell shoes, whatever, and still remain a Brahmin. Why? Because the Shastras always provided an escape clause, prayaschitta, atonement. This, Ambedkar said, gave caste a perpetual lease on life. It smothered critical thinking, the kind of reflective thought that could actually dismantle it. It's a powerful charge. That the religion was structured to maintain the status quo, protect the privileged, and provide justification for oppression.
And he contrasted this with other religions in India.
He did. He made the point that a Hindu breaking caste rules, especially interdining or intermarriage, would almost certainly be outcasted. But this idea of excommunication for breaking caste wasn't really there for Sikhs or Muslims in the same way, because their scriptures didn't mandate it to that degree. For Hindus, he argued, caste was clearly a sacred institution, not just a social custom. So if you wanted to break caste, your religion actively stood in your way. The sanctity of the Shastras was the fortress protecting the system.
Which meant reform needed a radical break, not just tinkering.
That was his conclusion, a fundamental break.
Now, he also linked this internal division directly to India's weakness as a nation, didn't he?
Yes, that was a crucial part of his argument, especially with independence on the horizon. He said caste precludes the possibility of social or political solidarity. It creates a labyrinth instead of a prairie for any kind of collective action. Basically, it fragments society so deeply that national unity becomes almost impossible.
How did that manifest, in his view?
He pointed out that a Hindu couldn't rely on fellow Hindus for support in the same way a Sikh or a Muslim might feel a sense of communal solidarity based on their faith. Caste ensures this pervasive lack of trust, this deep fragmentation within Hindu society. And this, he argued, leads to timidity, even cowardice, when facing external threats. a life of continuous defeat, because people couldn't act together as a unified force.
And he issued a pretty stark warning about independence, Swaraj.
A very stark warning. He said, without fundamental social change, without tackling caste, Swaraj for Hindus may turn out to be only a step towards slavery. Meaning, political independence without internal cohesion and justice would leave the nation weak, vulnerable either to outsiders or internal conflict.
So for Ambedkar, caste wasn't just a social problem, it was an existential threat to the nation itself.
Absolutely. More dangerous, potentially, than colonialism. It undermined the very possibility of a strong, unified India. Which reframes the whole independence struggle, doesn't it? Social reform wasn't secondary, it was foundational, prerequisite even.
Okay, a devastating critique. Let's turn to Gandhi's response. Section 3. Gandhi's counter-arguments. How did he defend the system Ambedkar wanted to annihilate?
Well, Gandhi's response, titled A Vindication of Caste, took a significantly different tack, almost opposite, really. He believed caste, in what he called its idealized form, Varna Vyavastha, was actually the genius of Indian society. He saw it as a wholesome custom, promoting national well-being. Back in 1920, he even called it the best possible adjustment for social stability.
So he separated this ideal Varna from the actual lived reality of Jati, the subcaste.
He did. He argued Jati was a corruption, a perversion of the original noble ideal of Varna. Varna for him was this spiritual division of labor based on inherent duties, not wealth or power, an extension of the family principle, providing order, stability.
But Ambedkar didn't buy that distinction, did he?
Not at all. He said Gandhi's definition of Varna just became a different name for caste, because it still involved following your ancestral calling, regardless of aptitude. For Ambedkar, the label changed, but the core problem, inherited hierarchy, lack of mobility, remained. He saw it as the same injustice, just wrapped in more spiritual language.
Did Gandhi's views change over time?
They did evolve, yes, but very slowly. Our sources suggest it was glacial, from defending caste in all its minutiae early on, including untouchability, though he later fought fiercely against that. He moved toward advocating fusing the thousands of jatis into the 4 varnas, which Ambedkar saw as pointless, still hierarchical. Towards the end of his life, he did say he no longer objected to interdining or intermarriage. But Ambedkar was deeply skeptical, saw it as too little, too late, conveniently said when it wouldn't risk any real political action or challenge power.
So instead of structural change, Gandhi emphasized morality.
Saints. Yes, that was central to his approach. He stressed the role of saints, moral reform. Argued Hinduism should be judged by its best examples, Chaitanya to Karam, who preached universal love, high moral character, not by its worst practitioners. He believed Hindu society could be made tolerable and even happy without any fundamental change in its structure if high-caste Hindus just adopted better morals, treated untouchables kindly. A change of heart among the privileged was the key for him.
And Ambedkar found that approach
fallacious, a waste of energy, a misreading of history. He pointed out that none of these saints actually attacked the caste system itself. They just preached all men were equal in the eyes of God, an innocuous proposition, Ambedkar called it. Easy to say, but it didn't change the brutal reality on the ground.
And he also said their example wasn't even effective.
Right. He noted the masses were taught a saint might break caste, but the common man must not. So, the saint's personal actions were rendered useless for systemic change. The moral appeal without structural change was just performative. It allowed the system to continue. It was, in his view, a kind of spiritual excuse that didn't require any real sacrifice from the privileged.
But couldn't Gandhi argue that moral shifts do eventually change society, even if slowly? Was Ambedkar too cynical? Too impatient?
That's a fair question. It hits the core difference. Ambedkar wasn't necessarily cynical about personal change itself, but he was deeply skeptical it could dismantle something as entrenched and religiously backed as caste without direct structural challenge. Caste wasn't just prejudice, it was power, privilege, economic control. Waiting for the oppressor's change of heart wasn't a viable strategy for the oppressed. History showed it hadn't worked. Appealing to conscience wasn't enough when power was so unequal. It had to be about action, rights, not just abstract morality.
And this difference played out dramatically at Mahad Satyagraha in 1927.
It did, a very real, very public clash. Ambedkar led thousands of Dalits to drink water from a public tank, Chabadar tank. A direct assertion of basic civic rights. Predictably, it led to violent backlash from privileged castes. They felt their sacred space was polluted.
How did Gandhi react to this direct action?
He condemned it, called it Duragraha, devilish force. the opposite of his satyagraha, soul force, which aimed to persuade the oppressor through nonviolence. He told untouchables to use sweet persuasion, not shock deep-rooted prejudices, rejecting direct confrontation, even for basic rights like water. It just starkly highlighted their different approaches. Gandhi wanted reform from within, maintaining harmony. Ambedkar demanded rights be taken, confrontationally if necessary.
And Ambedkar remembered that condemnation.
He never forgot it. Later wrote about how Gandhi didn't just fail to support them, he actively condemned them, sided with privileged sensibilities over basic rights. Speaks volumes, doesn't it? One prioritized social peace, the other demanded justice, even if it disrupted that peace.
Okay, Section 4. The Great Debate itself. Two clashing visions for India. Let's start with that idea of ancestral calling. Gandhi seemed to genuinely believe in sticking to hereditary occupation, Varnavyavastha, even though his own family had shifted roles slightly. What was Ambedkar's take on that?
He attacked it head-on, saw it as a cornerstone of caste tyranny, an affront to human dignity. He asked these incredibly pointed questions. Must a man live by his ancestral calling even if he finds it to be immoral? If everyone must, then it must follow that a man must continue to be a pimp because his grandfather was a pimp.
Wow, that's blunt.
Brutally blunt. But it exposed the moral bankruptcy he saw in it. For Ambedkar, this ideal was impossible, impractical, and morally indefensible, completely against liberty, agency, progress. It trapped people, stifled talent, perpetuated injustice generation after generation.
It really forces you, the listener, to think about that tension, doesn't it? Inherited destiny versus individual aspiration. How much freedom should individuals have?
Exactly. Ambedkar pushes us to value individual autonomy against the weight of tradition, a tension still very relevant today.
Now, the biggest political clash was over-representation, wasn't it? The Pune Pact.
The most significant, yes. During the roundtable conferences in the 30s, over the communal award, Ambedkar fought tooth and nail for separate electorates and a double vote for the depressed classes, the untouchables. Separate electorates meant they'd choose their own representatives exclusively, and the double vote, really innovative, meant they'd also vote in general constituencies, giving them leverage over privileged caste candidates too. Make them accountable.
Why did he feel this was so crucial?
He argued that without these strong safeguards, they'd just be overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and political power of privileged Hindus. Their representatives would end up as mere puppets, lackeys, unable to truly fight for their community.
But Gandhi, who accepted separate electorates for Muslims and Sikhs, refused them for untouchables.
Absolutely refused. He saw it as something that would permanently split Hindu society, threatened to fast unto death over it, called it balkanizing India, creating an eternal split, said he'd resist it with my life. The pressure was immense. Public opinion swung behind Gandhi. Ambedkar was painted as the villain risking the Mahatma's life, dividing the nation. Moral blackmail, essentially.
Which forced Ambedkar's hand.
Completely. Under huge duress, he signed the Pune Pact in 1932. It gave untouchables more reserved seats, on paper 148 instead of 78, but crucially, it abolished separate electorates and that vital double vote. Ambedkar mourned the loss of that priceless privilege, saw it as a massive political weapon surrendered.
Leaving Dalit representatives weaker.
That was his fear, and many argue it proved true. They became vulnerable to manipulation by dominant parties, forced to toe the line rather than advocate independently, turned into pliable candidates, as he put it. Critics say it secured the virtual disenfranchisement of Dalits despite the appearance of more seats.
So Gandhi effectively kept political power within the Hindu fold, concentrated among the privileged castes.
That was the outcome. It maintained the hierarchy within the political system, preventing Dalits from gaining real independent bargaining power. A deeply consequential moment.
Beyond politics, they had totally different visions for India's future society, right? Village versus city.
Vastly different, almost opposite utopias, you could say. Gandhi, in Hing Swaraj, critiqued Western modernity, industrialism, longed for this mythical Indian pastoral bliss, Ram Rajya in self-sufficient villages, cottage industries, local crafts, simple living. He warned against industrialism stripping the world bare like locusts, which seems incredibly prescient now with climate change.
But Ambedkar saw the village very differently.
As a nightmare, not a utopia. For him, the Indian village was a sink of localism, a den of ignorance, narrow-mindedness, and communalism. It was the very heart of caste tyranny. His critique came from lived experience and an embrace of Western liberalism, pragmatism. For Dalits, liberation lay not in the village, but in cities. Modernism, industrialization, big dams, big projects. These offered anonymity, opportunity, escape from that suffocating village control.
Though that model of development has its own critics today.
Ironically, yes. Environmental impact, displacement. It shows the complexities. No vision is perfect. But it highlights that fundamental clash, tradition versus modernity, shaped entirely by their different life experiences. Gandhi idealized a past that was hell for Ambedkar. Ambedkar sought a modern future that promised freedom, even with its own risks.
Okay, let's broaden out. Section 5. Wider context and legacies. Caste isn't just a Hindu issue.
That's a crucial point Ambedkar made, and it remains true. He noted Sikhs, Muslims, Christians in India were also infected. Caste prejudice often trumps religious belief, even when scriptures don't support it. It shows how deeply embedded it is socially beyond religious lines.
And this is worsened by what sources call the project of unseeing.
Exactly, a tendency within the Indian establishment, intelligentsia, to minimize or deny caste's existence and impact. Unlike apartheid, it's not visibly color-coded, so it's easier to ignore if you're not directly affected. Remember Durban, 2001, the World Conference Against Racism. Dalit activists tried to raise caste. The Indian government shut it down, insisted it was an internal matter, not the same as race, despite activists showing the parallels in discrimination based on descent.
This unseeing allows it to continue.
Precisely. Roy calls it sometimes a conscious political act, sometimes. Such rarefied privilege that caste has not been stumbled upon, therefore it is presumed to have been eradicated. If you don't see it, or choose not to see it, it thrives. Which is why Ambedkar's call to force people to see it remains vital.
And the economic and political data shows it's far from eradicated.
The statistics are stark. Vaishya is just 2.7% of the 1931 population, controlling huge chunks of economic activity. Brahmins, 6.4%, holding massively disproportionate shares, 36% to 63% of top jobs in civil services, judiciary, parliament. The power structures are clear.
Even in the media.
Especially there. One study found almost 90% of English print and 79% of TV decision makers were upper caste. Nearly half were Brahmin, and crucially, not one was a Dalit or Adivasi. Think about who shapes the narrative.
So for you, the listener, this isn't just history, it's about ongoing power imbalances.
Absolutely. Real-world power, influence, access, still skewed by caste. Even reservation policies face hostility, and merit often becomes a code word for protecting inherited privilege. It shows how deeply woven into modern India it still is.
One last piece of context, as Gandhi's time in South Africa, it complicates the picture, doesn't it?
Deeply complicates it. His early views there really shaped his later approach, including on caste. It's not the simple Mahatma story many know. His campaign there, 1893-1914, was mostly for passenger Indians, wealthy merchants, privileged Hindus. He was offended they were treated like native black Africans, not by segregation itself initially, but by Indians being lumped with Africans.
He actually used racist language.
Shockingly racist language, repeatedly, called Kafirs, a slur for black Africans. Uncivilized, dirty, living almost like animals. He agitated for separate facilities, stating he couldn't put up with being on the same level as natives. He saw Indians as superior. It reveals a clear racial hierarchy in his thinking at that time.
And he even supported the British in conflicts there.
Yes, volunteered in the Boer War, the Zulu Rebellion, seeking imperial brotherhood. Saw himself as a loyal subject then. What's fascinating and uncomfortable is seeing how these early experiences with racial hierarchy, trying to position Indians within it, shaped his later views on India's social hierarchy, caste. It reveals a complex, contradictory figure. His ideals evolved slowly or selectively applied, influenced by his biases.
So ignoring Gandhi when talking Ambedkar is wrong and vice versa.
Absolutely. Gandhi loomed over Ambedkar's world in myriad and unwonderful ways, often as an obstacle. And cutting Ambedkar out of Gandhi's story is a travesty. Their conflict is central to modern India's story. They are inextricably linked, even in opposition. You need both to understand the full picture.
Okay, so wrapping up, what does this all mean for us today? For you, the listener. We've dived deep into these two giants, Ambedkar and Gandhi, their clashing visions. From a rejected speech to a fast unto death. Their debate wasn't just academic, it literally shaped a nation's destiny.
And their legacy leaves us with this critical, ongoing challenge. Ambedkar's call to annihilate caste, destroy its religious backing, build society on liberty, equality, fraternity that's a radical, unfinished project, demands fundamental restructuring. Gandhi's focus on moral reform, the village ideal. Powerful critiques of industrialism, yes, but ultimately struggled to dismantle injustice at its roots, often prioritized harmony over radical change.
Ambedkar's closing words in the speech still hit hard, don't they? That warning. Yours is more difficult than Swaraj. In the fight for Swaraj, you fight with the whole nation. In this, you have to fight against the whole nation, and that too your own. His fear that without a casteless society, Swaraj itself could become slavery.
It leaves you with a powerful, maybe unsettling thought to take away. If democracy and progress haven't wiped out caste, but maybe just entrenched and modernized it, as the sources suggest, then what really counts as progress? And how do we measure the moral health of any society still battling such deep, often unseen injustices?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into one of modern history's most critical debates. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep asking. What foundational truths might we still be unseeing in our own societies, and what's the cost?